appreciate the use of the stone there because it actually helps connect, even though the bulk of the addition is in the back and around the back property line. It helps connect the existing building, two buildings
Right.
that are shared in that sort of parkway.
The Rogan House and
And
the
the-
small carriage house.
right.
Yeah.
And you're doing a lot line adjustment.
Yes, yeah. The applicant owns both of the properties in there, so we're realigning the lot lines so they're a little more equitable. And it'll allow for outdoor dining for the restaurant and maintain a significant portion of that courtyard with the Rogan House.
Yeah, that was sort of my, I went past there today, was looking at this trying to line it up with the parcel viewer, and it's like, yeah, okay, so that answers my question.
So the original building is from 1913 circa, and there was a 1970s addition
It's to the rear.
to the rear.
I have to admit, it's been about 4 or 5 months since I've combed through the record on that.
And then you're attaching to that.
To the rear, correct. And where, if we go to the floor plans, the half-size drawings, we go to sheet SD04, which is the last drawing. You can see that there's a wall thickness change, and about midway through the building, the walls are 1.5 feet thick. So the existing building ends here, and we've set that back to clearly distinguish the addition from the existing building, putting the egress doors that lead out into the courtyard, tucking them in there in a little recess.
And then the atrium area is along here,
Correct,
the stone wall is
Correct.
back there, and then kitchen is off to the back.
kitchen is to the back, right?
So when we're viewing the facade, for the most part, unless you're viewing it at an oblique angle, you're not seeing really from the street in front of the building, you're not really seeing much.
What you read in elevation view, there's, right. There's a photo simulation, that's this view here.
And will the trees that are in the park right now be kept? Because it seems like for the most part, I was looking on street view, and for the most part, that seems to shelter
It does.
significantly.
And the answer is yes.
Yes.
The pavers will have to be lifted up, some subsurface drainage installed. We have a local civil engineer designing that.
Okay.
There's not, it's all impervious now, so our post-development doesn't generate much more runoff, but we want to control that so that so we don't have puddles out there.
Right.
Pavers will be lifted, subsurface drainage, and then the pavers restored. And the landscaping to remain.
And if I'm following this correctly, the glass wall facing the street is to be foldable, to
Yes.
open up. So at certain times during the summer, it just folded against the wall.
It's a pretty common treatment in the city these days. Nano Wall is one of the manufacturers. Produces windows like that.
So does that control the design of what we're gonna see from the street, just the size and spacings of the glass?
So what you're seeing here in the rendering depicts our design intent, and I wouldn't expect the variation to be much more than a couple of inches this way or that way in the pattern.
Just trying to get a sense of sizing.
This is a new window, correct? On the side of the building?
That is new fenestration in the side of the building.
And it works nicely with the atrium.
So only the three, it's not really three, the three is if it's one Is that one thing?
It's a 1/1, 3 windows.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's the only,
And that was a later addition as well.
okay.
Concrete block in there.
Can you tell me what the material is on the addition before the atrium?
Yeah, is that stucco?
You know, honestly, we haven't gotten that far, so that's something that I'm happy to come back to the commission for. You know, it's a significant project. We have a process to wend our way through with site plan review, lot line revision. This is the first time the commission's seeing this, and so happy to come back and comment on that, but we're just not there yet.
Okay, so, but are you looking for a motion today, or is this site plan review, or ideally?
I mean, that would be planning board, site plan is planning board.
Yeah.
Well, but we do informal,
Right.
before somebody comes and gives.
Yeah, you
Right.
can give comment, and I think that's what Scott
I am
was
looking for that,
saying.
but, and to Julie's question, I can assure you that it would not be ephes, a synthetic stucco. But we may well propose a cement-based stucco for those sections there.
Likely colored to match.
Right, the
Yeah,
idea is that
brick
it
in general.
differentiates itself from the brick, but it's a compatible color, so that it all sort of blends together.
Is this a fireplace on the inside? The chimney wall?
Yes, the
Part of the wall?
applicant would like to do a fireplace at the end of that room.
This may be getting ahead of ourselves here, but normally we need to do an exhaust fan up and out of a chimney, up and out of a kitchen. Do
That
you
would
have
be-
a sense of where that's going to be?
Absolutely, that is to the rear. If you look at the floor plans, the proposed addition would obscures the kitchen by design. So the kitchen itself is all the way in the back property line. And behind that dining room addition, there's a small little courtyard where all of the dirty business of restaurants can be concealed from the public view.
Okay, sort of back behind that wall?
Right, so here's the cook line, which would put the Ansel system hood, the grease duct going through the roof, and it would not be visible at that angle because it's so deep into the property line. So it would go through the roof all the way at the back corner.
All right. Thank you.
And part of the lot line revision was to include an easement so that the kitchen could be fed with deliveries and with the refuse going out at the back of the property. So we wouldn't be having trucks queuing up in front of the restaurant, but they could come around on Crown Street, pull into the parking lot that's controlled by the applicant, and load and unload. And when produce comes in, it's unpacked, you're left with these rigid cardboard vessels, if you will, that need to be broken down and stacked up. And most restaurants have a small refuse
Fenced off
area.
area.
Right. So all of that exists behind the addition, obscuring it from the public view.
I understand it's going to be, it's all common ownership, is Joe considering creating an easement across the?
Yes, an easement has been drafted and is part of
All right.
the lot line
Yeah, in
revision.
case they ever get split out, yeah.
Yeah.
And
And you
that
have
will be
legal
part of
counsel
site
that's-
plan review presumably, and the sizing and layout of that easement is going to be part of your site plan review and the plan, with the planning board, I'm presuming?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. That's all been depicted on the site plan. Heidecker is the surveyor. And that's before the planning board.
I want to go back to the masonry wall. I just find it to be very distinct, and if it's going to be a homage to what it's referencing, I would love for it to actually use a bit of what it's referencing, like the actual stone of the buildings that, are no longer there, or just some sort of meaningful tie, because it's for me, it's just standing alone, and it's just calling a lot of attention to itself, and I'd like for it to be more meaningful attention.
Do you mean like a limestone similar to the stone
To actually use
house next
stone
to it?
that is existing from buildings that no longer exist there, or some sort of tie into the history so that, you know, it's a real meaningful amalgam. It's not just a reference, it's actually using what was there
Are you aware
in
of
some
a
way.
source?
No. I'm not aware of a source, but you probably are, right?
Not easy to come by, I'm thinking.
I
Just
think
thinking $6
local
is
stone
worth,
would be, local stone would be easy. I don't know if I could commit to finding stones that once belonged to a stone house.
That would be asking.
Or just, I don't know, I just feel like it's very distinct from the rest of the building. And I find that troubling because I don't fully believe in the purpose of it yet.
Okay.
But the stone that you're proposing, what is this? Is it just a face kind of stone, or is it this?
I would, it may be, the coloration in the rendering is a little pink, the patterning
Uh-huh.
may not be spot on, but
Uh-huh.
the intent was to use the types of stones that you see in stone buildings throughout Kingston.
Uh-huh. But it's actual stone, it's not just a face?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. The last project that we did, a treatment like this was on River Road in Rhinebeck, and we sourced stone that was hand chiseled and.
Perhaps it's just the white gable roof of it that stands out to me. That was just like a more in line with the rest of the color scheme, then it wouldn't be so obvious, I guess. But then again, that echoes all of the stone seating.
Right.
So the parking you were talking about earlier is off of Crown Street near where I think it's like a red carriage house is now.
Yeah, there's, in the packet, you have a survey map,
Mm-hmm.
and of the existing and the proposed. So if we look, go to the second sheet with the proposed site plan. And I'll come around and shoot there. This one. This is the back of the packet.
I think it's L102.
Correct.
Yeah.
Here's the existing building, proposed addition, the access to that parking area there, and the Rogan House and the carriage house. And the thick black line fixed the lot line, is the addition there.
So the Rogan house and the carriage house shouldn't be affected in any way by what is proposed?
Correct. Correct.
And are the garden walls going to remain? I know you're pulling up the pavement to do the irrigation.
For the most part,
For the
yeah.
most part.
Maybe some, we've talked about reorganizing them a little bit.
Mhm.
The present owner has done a lot of landscaping out in that area. He wants to reimagine that from being perennials to being herbs that might be used in the restaurant itself.
Right.
And when we get into seasonal seating out there, we might want to reorganize them. But those are modern walls, they're not historic stone
Okay.
walls.
Are there any parts of this that you specifically would ask us to focus on at this stage?
Well, I think the applicant would appreciate feedback from this board if they are aghast at this proposal or generally sympathetic to the direction that we're going, maybe send us back for consideration on some details, but given that this is a big undertaking and we have several boards to go to, appreciate some feedback, maybe a motion on the scale, subject to refinement of certain details.
I would urge us away from that because we're gonna have to, if we actually give more than just sort of advisory opinions here, we're going to have to trigger seeker. And I'm not sure we want to step through that. Are you reading this the same way I am?
It's actually a type 2 action based on the square footage of what we're talking about. So,
We could.
you can give feedback. I think you can definitely give feedback.
I think that's important, and I want to tell
Yeah.
you that I'm generally impressed. I like the references without, trying to specifically copy. The glass walls, this I think is the first one I've seen going in uptown. It is a new look, and in the way that you've handled it is not overpowering. It's not like it's covering the entire old beer garden. And also the way everything is tucked back behind. I'm impressed that you're working to blend in with what's around. I'd echo Julie's concern with that wall. I like the idea. It's hard to exactly tell from this rendering what you have in mind. But
Okay.
what you're describing sounds like I think a really appropriate way to make reference without copying.
I'm a little bit different on that take, but I've already sort of stated it. I think it does connect to the next parcel of land in those buildings in a sort of sensitive way and bring, you have a brick, essentially commercial building that's 100 and some years later, although the Rogan House is a reconstruction, I believe. Caught on fire, it was burned. And so it's always been nice that the space has been maintained between sort of the more commercial area and the four corner stone houses. So you have a view that is sort of 18th century, encroached upon when you look one direction, and then you have a view that is sort of more contemporary 19th century streetscape. And so that's always been sort of just, whether incidentally or not, I think a beloved area. I appreciate the fact that, as I said, you're wrapping the bulk of the massing is along the back of the property line, and you've taken a lot of steps to make it sort of recede through the materials that you're using. But that end cap is, I think, a bold choice, but I think it also sort of plays really nicely with the existing structures on that corner, and still gives you a sense of, from the streetscape, if you're looking at those buildings, a connection there. I would also wonder if it might make sense for us just to go through our 12 criteria quickly,
Okay.
if we can do that quickly.
Before we get into that, I just had one comment, and that is, I like the stone wall that's added, and I agree with what you're saying about the way that the building is positioned, that it still honors the garden space. So all of that I like. One part that keeps drawing my eye, and I don't want to have my eye go solely to the new addition versus looking at the surrounding, is the glass going to be very dark glass across the front of the building?
I've not gotten that far.
I-
Whether it would have a tint to it or not?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms, it might just be the photograph, but
I
that
suspect
kind of
it is
just
the
pulls me
rendering.
in.
Yeah.
And if it replicated more the color of the glass here, or, lightly tinted
Right.
I
And
think it would not stand out quite as much.
I think that's a function of the rendering, but it would be a low E glass, which has a slightly darker tint to it. I wouldn't intentionally tint it any further than that. I can say with absolute certainty that it would not be a reflective glass. So, and
I'm very welcoming of this design. I think it's very nice, and I think it's a really underutilized spot. So I'm really happy with it overall. I'm welcoming.
to Julie's point about the stone, it has to be done well, or it won't. So that's something we're certainly committed to. We'll be doing mock-ups. And there's a lot of work for us yet to do in terms of detailing here, but this is a process.
Yeah, I happen to be a person that's very drawn to color, but Julie also mentioned about the cap on the stone wall. And maybe, again, it's just a rendering, but if it matched the wall, or, you know, then it would be
The
fine.
intent is that it would be stone.
Yeah.
I think that's a function of the rendering.
Yeah.
And it's something that we talk about in the office all the time, is that because we have the technology and the ability to do these renderings, it places almost an unfair burden on the design process, because people will focus on aspects of the rendering that are somewhat disingenuous.
Yeah.
There are some limitations in the
Yeah.
Okay,
You
so,
almost want to do go back to watercolors. Colored pencils.
That would be more helpful.
So do you want a table?
Yeah, I think, do we want to march you through I think with you, we can simply draw your attention. Is there a particular criterion that we would like to draw Scott's attention to on what we've seen so far?
it's just that we have 2 additions on the agenda. So it might be helpful, instead of just doing it for one, to sort of go through this process for both, if we can do it somewhat.
Okay, sure. Let's march through pretty quickly.
So section 405-64B of the City of Kingston Code, City Zoning Section outlines criteria to be used by our commission when making preservation notice determinations. The commission shall consider the effect of the proposed work in changing, destroying, or affecting the exterior features of the landmark or landmark districts upon which the work is to be done. 2, the relationship between the results of the work and the exterior architectural features of other neighboring improvements. 3, the factors of aesthetic, historical, and architectural values and significance, architectural style, design, arrangement, texture, material, and color. 4, the special character and aesthetic interest that any structure involved adds to this area. And 5, the difficulty or impossibility of reproducing any structure involved because of its design, texture, material, position, and or detail. We're further instructed that we should, quote, consider the following additional criteria as set forth in section 405-64C to be used as a basis where relevant for establishing relationships to the external features of the buildings in the immediate neighborhood. So 1, the building height in relation to the surrounding buildings. And to me, as we see, it's a 1-story brick structure. The addition, with the exception of sort of the end wall, is in keeping with that, is almost deferential in size and scale to the existing structure. The relationship to nearby roof shapes, again, with the exception of the addition that is on this leg, the roof shapes are almost exactly the same, so that is mirrored here. The size, proportion, and spacing of openings within the facade and elevations exposed to view. The windows, as Julie mentioned, there's an additional set of windows that references the window openings that are a part of the addition. So that seems to be in dialogue. The rhythm and spacing of buildings and building elements on the street. So seems that there's a good flow of massing essentially of the building. Most of it hidden behind the building itself, tucked away. Even the entrances are recessed into the building, the additional entrances in the back. The design and placement of entrances and projections. So as we had discussed, the only projecting feature that is visible from the street is placed to the back of the property boundary and is made of materials that allow it to be a little bit less showy, I guess, a little bit less intrusive. Yes. The relationship of materials, textures, and colors. So as Scott was saying, some of the details about the exact materials are still in the works, but the plan here appears to be to reference the colors of the existing materials, the brick. There is metal work to the front of the building that's pressed in the cornice. And so these elements, as well as the glass paned elements, are repeated throughout the proposal. The continuity of walls, I also see here that the walls are, with the exception of the entrance, which is recessed a little bit, the main entrance or the additional entrance in the back, the continuity of the walls remains consistent throughout, with variation in the element that is perpendicular to the structure in the back. Relationship of landscape elements, it seems for the most part, the park elements, as were discussed, will be retained essentially, and the appropriateness of paving, those elements will be retained, and the effect of the existing or historically significant spaces. So to me, this project seems to be sensitively sited, the addition so that the park itself is remaining and minimally intrusive, as minimally as possible intrusive upon. The very last section that we have to consider is 405-64B. So it is further the duty of the commission to exercise its judgment in a manner that maintains the desirable character of the landmark or landmark district and prevents construction, reconstruction, alteration, or demolition that is out of harmony with existing buildings insofar as character, material, line, color, line, and details are concerned, and thus to preserve the beauty and the character of the landmark or landmark district.
I just had one question. We're seeing it from Crown Street and from John Street. Is it sighted from any other areas, what the view shed? Do you know?
We always go back to the NPS standards of the sidewalk opposite the building as the criteria for judgment. So we do have a 3D model of that entire corner. So I can create views, at every 5, 10, 15 feet.
It's just that it's the stockade area, and it's important how it's viewed from all angles, really, if it can be seen.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's kind of tucked away there. So I was just curious about that. I guess I could walk and see
There
what.
will be a couple of chunks of Crown Street,
Uh-huh.
and it's certainly invisible from Green and certainly invisible from front.
Okay. That's what I was getting at. I
Yeah.
couldn't envision.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the feedback. It's helpful, and we'll see you next month. We'll develop the elevations a little bit more and think about the materials, and will I come back as a recurring item, or do I need to?
No,
Make
it
a-
would just be, if it's tabled, it'll just automatically roll over.
And as far as the 2-week prior submission, can I be on the agenda for next month?
Yeah.
Whether I make a submission in 2 weeks or not? I think what I bring back will require some discussion.
I would agree with that. That's what I would expect, given what you're proposing here. You'll have some tweaks and changes, I think, as this goes along.
Yep. Great. Thank you all. Good evening.
Could we formally table?
Table, yeah.
I'll entertain a motion to table this proposal.
Can't get rid of you.
I'll entertain a proposal to table discussion of, let me get the number right,
Item number 5.
65 John Street. Would someone like to make that motion? All right, then I will move that we table discussion on 65 John Street till next month. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
Kevin, thank you. Thank you. Wait, there's more.
It's my eagerness to get to dinner.
All right.
3 in this direction.
So, are we dealing with exterior painting on 37 Broadway and conversion garage at the same time here?
So I respectfully request a table 37 Broadway.
Okay.
Move on to 39.
All right, so I did, so shall we consider that withdrawn for this month and
No, just table.
tabled? All right, then I will move that we table consideration of 37 Broadway until next month at the request of the applicant. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Who seconded?
That'd be Kevin.
Okay.
Okay, 39 Broadway is an interesting property. Most of you know it's the Skilly Pot building. It is owned by Charles Blakeman. It's 39 Broadway LLC. And as you go up Beale Street, midway through your packet, you'll see there's a site plan. As you go up Beale Street,
Is that a Beale or Union?
Beale.
Okay.
There are photographs in your packet. Photograph number 1 was the best illustration of the space that I'm about to present to you. That is
Yeah.
the garage space. And this was owned by Ruth and Al Bendelius. They used it as storage space for their various properties that they had downtown.
Julie, sorry, just trying to make sure that the decision documents come back to me.
After the photographs, there are 2 drawings prepared by our office in your packet that show the existing and proposed floor plan and the existing and proposed elevations. And as far as the commission goes, I think your review will be primarily focused on the new entrance and proposed signage. If these drawings are a little small for reviewing the detail, I brought a couple of larger versions of the same. I want to spread those out. Most of the commercial storefront entrances on the roundout are wood and recessed. So we are proposing to remove the overhead garage door, recess the primary entrance into that space into a little alcove, create a wooden storefront entrance, not an aluminum storefront entrance, with wood panels below the side lights, and a wood full-length glass door. There's a detail on sheet A02, the bottom right of the page. It shows a cross-section of how we propose to construct that assembly, which echoes how the majority of the storefronts are on the front end.
I'm confused. Where's the Broadway elevation?
That's
The property
around
has
the
a-
corner.
Yeah, property has a Broadway address.
Right?
It's one building, but this is going up a Beale Street.
It's a two-story building on Broadway
Right.
itself. That Skilly Pot Antiques is not going to be changing at all. It's a three-story, thank you. So that this is a sort of one-story
Yeah.
old garage space behind it, if you were standing on
Yeah.
Broadway.
To be clear, as Skilly Pot wraps around Beale Street and goes from 3 stories to 1 story, the Skilly Pot Antique Store actually extends all the way back to that door. And there is a small courtyard that connects this space to the Skilly Pot Antique space and to 37 Broadway, tucked back in there. And you can see that on the key map.
So you'll be replacing the actual door with a larger window with a panel below it?
Yes, yeah, it's an inferior commercial modern door.
And you'll also be replacing the existing boarded up window
Correct.
with an actual window?
With an actual window, wood with simulated divided lights, not applied, not like stick-in grills, but applied to the glass.
And then a panel below the window that replaces the door to space it?
Correct.
Okay.
The proposed material is an exterior grade MDF. Xtera is one of the brand names. If you're familiar with the Finkelstein law offices across the street from Dunkin' Donuts, several years ago we redid that facade, exposing the cast iron columns and infilling with wood paneling. That product has been holding up remarkably well. It's dimensionally stable. You can route it, so you can create profiles in the moldings that suit the style of the building. So, I'm proposing the same here.
Is this a wooden panel, because even salon signs going on?
Signage will come back separately.
But is
They're
that-
working with Timely Signs, and I don't know what they're proposing.
Would they be thinking about putting like a clear story or something? A window up there, or?
No, that's brick right now. It's actually parapet, if you look at the photograph. So whatever it is, it would be applied. The signage that's shown here, we're not requesting approval from this board. The salon did go before the planning board, so it was appropriate for the planning board to see where the signage was proposed and if it was in conformance with the guidelines. The planning board voted unanimously to approve the project, subject to HLPC and HAC approval. If I'm not mistaken, so, right?
Yeah.
HAC has
Yes.
jurisdiction on this as well.
So you don't know, but still, would it go over the brick?
Over the brick.
Would it disturb the brick?
Absolutely would not disturb the brick. Certainly accept that as a condition, would be applied. And that's tenant driven.
Did this commission approve the MDF? For the
I don't know, that the HLPC had jurisdiction of the Finkelstein project. It was on.
Yeah, it's right on Broadway.
On Broadway.
Yeah.
So HAC would have been. the only-
HAC reviewed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what material are the Marvin window frames?
Wood.
Wood.
Yeah, we use the MDF for large panels because it's dimensionally stable. It's basically a recycled pulp wood product. We found that other materials that we've tried, they move all over the place and they're much more synthetic.
So it's only for the panel itself, right? Or is it for the surround window?
No, well, boral trim, if you look in the detail, those shapes, the stickings and It's, let me describe it, it's a recycled material made with fly ash, and it tools like wood, but it's more dimensionally stable. It can tolerate being in direct contact with moisture. So when you've got things like this, where the wood is in direct contact with the sidewalk, it's also very dense, in the same way that Ipe and products like that are dense. They can take the shovel going against them. But if you have any doubts about the quality or texture or authenticity of the material, you can look at the Finkelstein project, which has been, I would say, maybe about 3.5, 4 years now, through several winters,
Yeah.
and it's holding up remarkably well. The best part about the product is that you can put it on a router, you can replicate shapes, it's durable, it's sustainable. They don't make wood the way they used to. Now
It doesn't grow anymore.
right. You can't buy it.
The size of the same.
Has this been presented to HAC as well already?
No,
No.
planning board approved this.
Got it. So the use is approved, you're coming to us first for design.
Correct.
Further questions?
Are they leaving the brick as is, or are they planning on changing the color?
We haven't talked about changing the color yet, but that if we did change the color, then we need to come back to this body. It's a daunting process for a small shop owner, to negotiate a lease with the landlord and then be looking at 3 to 4 months before they can start work, which means then doing the work, which is 6, 7 months down the road. The advice that we gave them was, since there was a lot of anxiety about whether they should sign or could sign a lease in a space that was vacant and needed improvement, that let's get the principal use approved, make sure that the Landmarks Commission is okay with the facade, and then at that point, we can talk about paint colors, for 1 or 2 meetings if we need to, but at least you can get started working inside the building. No work will commence here until the tenant is secure in making an investment in the building, that they will be fully entitled.
Definitely improve it.
Yeah. It will be a big addition to that block and tie to the commercial zone in a way that the present layout just doesn't. All right, I will entertain a motion to approve.
Seeker.
Seeker. Thank you for keep writing herd on me.
Since we're talking about color,
Yeah.
prior to subsequent to submitting the application, it was brought to my attention that every year or two, the tenant at the Skilly Pod building, the antiques tenant, goes out and touches up the paint on the building. And I cautioned them about doing any painting until we were before this board. And they want to repaint the building in the same colors, but get rid of the light blue that exists in the panel above.
So this is in the panel above their front door, or is that the wraparound?
Panel above the windows up here,
Okay.
okay? And just use the darker blue color, so the beige and the blue. And
So it would simplify the
Correct.
color scheme.
Right.
I know you'd like to fold that into this application.
They want to get rid of the light part and keep the dark.
Yes,
So the mullions, everything would be dark blue.
correct. It's a beige and navy blue.
That little cornice thing or whatever above, it looks rounded almost, that would be the same dark.
Right, yeah.
That's actually,
It would all just be
it's-
dark.
that's more of the beige there, but it is.
But that would go dark also.
Same color scheme with the exception of the turquoisey blue, eliminating that.
Doesn't an application have to be submitted for that? I mean, it's,
Well, the building is before us. Normally,
It's on one property.
do we know we have a historic,
If you can't act, I understand, I mean, it's a, I don't know how this body is treating repainting your building with the same color. Do applicants need to come back?
if it's an
Not the
absolute
same.
replacement in kind, that typically is, it doesn't need us. But this is it seems like a small change,
Yeah.
I understand, but it is a change, and if they could name their colors and we can get that to carry it forward with the next owner, and we can hold up a paint chip and say, yep, this one. That would be a huge help to us. And in the long run, the more we do that, the more consistent we can be. So I would ask for that, if they don't mind coming back next month.
Okay.
You're already coming back on the neighbor building, so.
Yeah, they're different tenants, and this one's a little anxious, so, but I will tell them to wait patiently.
And if you could guide them to the right paint chip, that will help them a lot.
Certainly.
All right. So, we will start with the State Environmental Quality Review Act.
I so move to find this a type 2 action under seeker.
I'll second. All those in favor? Aye. All right, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the design changes proposed to the rear of 39 Broadway, replacing the garage door with a store entrance as set forth in the plans before us. Would someone like to make that motion? All right, then I move that we find, as a matter of fact, that the changes to the rear of 39 Broadway to remove the garage door, replace an existing entry door with a window and panel, and to establish a window that's now been boarded up, is consistent with the streetscape of the Rondout Historic District, that the changes as proposed will help tie this part of the building to the commercial district focused on Broadway, and that the character of the property will be enhanced by the changes as proposed. And that we issue a,
Notice of preservation.
thank you, notice of preservation action in favor of the changes as submitted. Do I have a second?
second.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. And
Now
thank
you can
you.
get rid of me.
Ah,
Who seconded?
Thank you.
Jane?
Jane.
I second.
All right. Next on the agenda is 141 Green Street.
This is just one hour, just
Here we go.
Hi.
See if this thing holds up. Bring it closer.
Okay.
Okay, there's another one coming around somewhere.
That is, yep, right here on the front page. Hi.
Hi. I'm Jim Fish of Lodge Architecture and Building Science, and today I'm very excited to share with you the energy retrofit and second floor expansion for 141 Green Street. This is the same design and presentation that was unanimously approved last week by the Heritage Area Commission, thank you. And Ed Ford was there, so that's pretty cool too. 141 Green Street is a 1954, 1,100 square foot non-contributing three-family house, if you can believe that, on a 45 by 75 foot lot, and it's where John Street dead ends into Green Street. I'm also very excited to share this with you because it's been the result of 4 years of sketching and modeling and shifts in scope and shape and inspiration. In a result of a design that I hope is respectful of its 18th and 19th century neighbors as well as its 20th century roots, while at the same time very 21st century in its vernacular inspired design and sustainable building technologies. So over here on the site plan, we see that 141 Green Street is surrounded by the Colonel Abraham Hasbrook house, that's Jed's house. It's a limestone house built in the 18th century. Then to the north, we have Paul and Queen's house, the Dumont house, 19th century, it's green clapboard here. The Van Kuren house is directly across the street, that's Aaron and Kat's house. That's the limestone and white clapboard house right here. And then the Kierstead house, which is the yellow clapboard house that gets a lot of attention during the Friends of Historic Kingston tours. I don't know if any of you know this, but when the tourists come around, they stand right in front of 141 Green Street with their back to this house. And they point at all the other houses. So that's what I'm starting with. All right. So 141 Green is not visible from the four corners where Crown and John are. But if you're walking down John Street towards Green Street, the northernmost side of 141 becomes visible. And one thing that I was very much inspired by are all the way up to the ridge shed dormers that are on the back of the Van Kuren house. And so I thought that the first design move would be to replicate a shed dormer on the front of the house. I'll show you that in a second. The dormer is well within the Cape Cod vernacular, its vocabulary. It gives an intermediate stepping stone to the rest of the design, which I'll show you next. It provides a really nice window seat view partially down John Street, and it's a nice relief from the large space, which you will also see next. And it also conveniently, strangely enough, provides a nice place for the power mast to come into the house off the pole. You need a certain height in order to get the electric in. Also, I have a couple other photos. If you're looking down Green Street, you can see that all the homes on Green Street have this very close to the sidewalk presence, very much an eave edge. And 141 Green is set back from that edge, as was its design in 1954. So it's not really contributing to the edge as well as the history. And then I have another view of it here. So part of the design intention you will see is an effort to bring it out to the street with its neighbors in order to create that line on Green Street. So without further ado, I'll show you the next board. So here's that shed dormer I was talking about coming down John Street. This is the first thing that you would see from 141 Green. But then I wanted that to be the jumping off point to create the addition. So the addition is really the same as the shed dormer, it's just brought forward. It's brought forward in order to create entrance protection over the front door, and it provides obviously some much needed space on the second floor. Right now, that apartment on the third floor is just simply under the eaves with the two dormers in the front. So in my practice, I like to work with a lot of different roof shapes, and I find inspiration all over the place: gambrels, gables, mansards. And for this, I thought that it would be interesting to take the same elevation, the same roof pitch from this shed dormer, which is about a 412, and replicate it here. So really, I'm taking the shed dormer and I'm bringing it and I'm expanding it and making it taller. And then it's a 12-12 pitch, so you can see that the ridge actually, the addition actually disappears behind the back of the Cape Cod roof, so it creates some interest from the street. You start wondering, where does that go? Where am I? So the addition doesn't go all the way across because I really wanted to keep the original Cape Cod gable shape. I wanted to pay respect to its 1954 history. Let's go. We'll come back to this, don't worry. So this project incorporates two approaches to the same modern building science technology, the passive house. I'm incorporating the passive house design as new construction and a deep energy retrofit. I am a passive house certified architect. I've worked on net zero projects. I'm LEED accredited. I'm familiar with living building challenges, and my experience leads me to believe and to understand which of these checklists and approaches is best for each project and how they overlap and interact. And for this one, the house being what it is, needing new siding, roofing, windows, it needs everything. So a deep energy retrofit made a lot of sense to me. And in doing that, what you do is you take the existing gable shape and you add insulation to the outside of the house. And then you add a new rain screen to the walls with new cedar siding, and then you give it a new roof. So what you're doing is you're taking that insulation value way through the roof, and you're able to heat the house with very little energy. And then on the addition side, so this section is obviously through this shape, which is the new addition of the second floor expansion. This has a very generous amount of cavity for new insulation, triple pane windows, airtight construction, heat energy, what's it called? Energy recovery ventilation system. And this is what makes a passive house. So I haven't done the heat calculations on this yet, but I believe it's going to pass, just based on its size. So this is the third apartment upstairs. You can see the main space with a little shed dormer window seat looking down John Street. And then downstairs, the two apartments are pretty much as they were. They're just they're brought up to snuff, bathroom and kitchen wise. So since this existing property is currently a non-conforming 20th century design that recedes from the street, the proposed design still shows the original intention through the retrofit, even though the district wasn't designated historic when this house was built. And the addition cantilevers out to help continue that street line plane. Both forms are monochromatic in their materials and color. The idea of the cape is that I wanted it to be the materials of the time and draw inspiration from the limestone buildings around it. So the roof, the siding would all be the same color and all inspired from the limestone houses. And then the addition would draw its inspiration from another stone, bluestone. So the contrast would be probably a little less than what you're seeing here in the rendering. But the idea is that this is monochromatic to show limestone, and this is monochromatic to show bluestone. One of the materials that I'm showing is this Shusukibon burnt wood siding. Now this is cypress, but I'd be using cedar. And I feel that this is an homage to the burning of Kingston, tongue-in-cheek. And I might even go as far as the standing seam roof. If it matches, it might be gunmetal gray.